back here we have Lieutenant Considine from the Harvard Police Department. We have Bill Massey, who is the school liaison for Chatham Police, so Sergeant Bill Massey. I think we've got Dan Pascal with the Chatham Fire, and we have some of our counselors and our administrators are here. And after, I think, Bill, you're going to be doing the presentation on one of my plates. So after Bill gives his presentation on what we have been training our staff to do in response to active shooter situations, we'll also have Melissa Dwyer, who's our Director of Student Service, talk about some of the things that she covers with parents when it comes to mental health first aid. And just things to think about for children, because this is a bigger issue than just firearms and banning firearms when it comes to school safety. And I would really like to thank all of you. I think we all lost a bet. Last time we gave a presentation like this, I think there was 5 people came. If we had it in the auditorium, it was white. I'm like, okay, let's not have it in the auditorium. Let's have it where we can actually have a conversation. And it's actually nice to see a big crowd. So I'm glad that you're here. And I will turn things over to Sergeant Massey, and we will make sure we have plenty of time for conversation. I want to hear what you're thinking and what you're concerned about.
So, good evening. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. So, by way of introduction, my name is Bill Massey, and as Scott Carpenter said, I'm with the Chatham Police Department. I'm a sergeant. I'm the school liaison between the police department and the Chatham schools, and I serve in a pseudo school resource officer capacity, in that I spend about 3 days between the middle school and the elementary school in Chatham, and also occasionally spend some time here with Officer Tom Clark, who does a fantastic job here at the high school, as well as at Harwich Elementary School and the charter school on Route 137. So again, to echo what Scott said, thank you all for coming. Last year's attendance was not anywhere near this, which is why we moved it into this room. But it's refreshing and disappointing that we have this large of a group to talk about this topic. It's a topic that we obviously don't want to acknowledge that we really need to spend a lot of time on, but at the same time, we would be irresponsible if we didn't spend enough time on this topic. So what I'm going to do is sort of run through our crisis response protocols that we use in the district, which encompass all of our schools, as well as at the Tech, at Cape Cod Tech Regional. So the things you're going to see on the screen and that I'm going to discuss are true at all of our schools. Collectively, uniformly, we work with the Chatham Fire Department, the Chatham Police Department, the Harwich Police Department, and the Harwich Fire Department. It's a very tight group that drills and practices, and we share the same collective goal, and that's maintaining school safety and being prepared for what we hope we never have to prepare for. So on the screen, just up through 2012, this is a statistic that's pretty astonishing, and I don't think we're going to find the answer to it in here or find a solution to it in here. But I think it's important to acknowledge it, to observe that we lead the nation in active shooter incidents, and that's not just schools. That's active shooters. That includes businesses, office buildings that fit the definition of an active shooter, which is someone entering the building either unannounced or somebody that turns violent inside a building who was already there and commits an act of violence. And over the average, this is over the last 15 or 18 years, this is how it's increased. It used to be, almost 4 in a 1-year period, and that has actually, this is an old slide from the FBI, but it has actually increased as you would expect it would on that plot of bar. That I think is up to between 25 and 30 per year. So unfortunately, there was plenty of data for us to look at as we, as a district, decided what were we going to do about our crisis response protocols. What were we going to do? We had been doing the traditional lockdown, which was remain silent in your rooms, everybody hide in the corner or under a desk, and hope that the bad guy or the bad person just moves on and eventually leaves the building. What we learned, unfortunately, with much data from several school-based incidents was that that policy as the only response did not serve anybody in the school very well. There were more casualties in rooms where people did what they were told to do, which was to lock down and hide. What we learned from the Virginia Tech shooting a few years ago was that people, despite their policy on campus to lock down, there were people that went against that policy and they self-evacuated. Some of them ran for closest doors, some of them jumped out windows, and the survivability increased. So what they looked at was the course that the shooter took in that building, and as he made his way through an area where people were supposed to have been locked down, those rooms were empty, and that increased the number of people who survived that incident. So what would have been a much larger tragedy was significantly less of a tragedy, in that many people survived simply by self-evacuating on their own. We also learned that over the course of these school shootings and active shooter incidents that the eventual police response did little, if anything, to stop the violence. In most cases, the violence ends prior to the police even setting foot in the building. And in the cases that it doesn't end before the police get there, as soon as the intruder is met with some type of counteraction from an armed police officer, that person either turns himself in or self-dispatches, and in most cases they self-dispatch by ending their own life. So what we looked at was ALICE, which was quickly emerging as a best practice solution or response to an active intruder incident. And it stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And it's important to understand that it's not necessarily in that order. What it also encompasses is the true ALICE model assumes that the school building is fortified with this centrifuge of, like, if you think back to the Wizard of Oz, where the great wizard could see everything, hear everything, and control the building. Well, that's just not practical. You can't retrofit buildings like that. So we don't have that inherent ability to have someone that can oversee everything and know what's going on in every corner of the room. So what we did was we arrived at what's called ALICE Light, and we call it Run, Hide, Fight, which is what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to hit on each of those things. Alert would be the initial announcement that there's an incident or an active shooter or violent intruder occurrence. Lockdown is still going to be an option, and I'll explain how that can work in some cases. Inform is getting the word out to everybody in the building. Sometimes we would be crippled by the fact that we don't have immediate access to a PA system in an incident that's unfolding right before us. Counter, which I think is going to present some of the most controversy with especially our younger-based student populations, and evacuate. And that's obviously going to be the first thing that we're going to recommend that people do. So we determined that if anything happened today, we would need an interim plan. So we arrived at Run, Hide, Fight. And it goes back to the basic premise of fight or flight. Your human instinct, your natural human instinct, when you're faced with a dangerous situation that you really have very little control over, your flight response is going to kick in. It's going to happen. It's similar to when my mom and dad years ago would teach me about when you're walking home from school, you don't get into that white van when a stranger pulls up alongside you. That white van means danger. And if that happens, my parents taught me to run away from it. So if you parallel that thinking to an active intruder incident or an active shooter incident or active violence in a school building, once that building becomes unsafe, we should teach our kids to run away from it. And we already do that because if there's a fire in the building, which makes the building unsafe, we teach them from a very early age to run away, to leave the building. So based on that, it seemed logical and sensible that getting away from the danger is the most efficient way and the best way to avoid a school tragedy. The program, the ideas of Run, Hide, Fight are endorsed by the Department of Homeland Security, the New York City School and Police Departments, which operate more schools than any other jurisdiction in the country. The FBI endorses it, and the Massachusetts Task Force on School Safety also endorses it. But it's not without controversy, and we'll certainly talk about that. So initially, the decision to flee, absent having that Wizard of Oz in the center of the building that can see all and tell all, without that, we have to have some type of information system that provides people with the knowledge that it's time to leave. This could be based on a PA announcement. So if somebody breaches the office area, and our schools are very well fortified, I should have started out by saying that our school buildings are very safe places, and they have become increasingly safe since certainly since 2012. And I think the Sandy Hook incident really opened our eyes to the importance of locking down our buildings and controlling access when people that didn't need to be in the school would be excluded from the school. So that has improved over the last several years. So it could also be based on an alert notification yelled out by a staff member. Most of our school buildings are pretty big, and they're not really laid out where you can get the message to everybody right away. So what could be happening in the science wing could be a dangerous situation, and down in the art corner, maybe there's not a danger. But if something happens in the science wing and somebody doesn't have access to a PA, certainly a staff member can shout out and yell, gunman in the science wing, gunman on second floor, gunman outside of classroom 205. And that could be the impetus to have everybody evacuate the building. It could be based on stimuli, which happened recently in California. People heard gunshots nearby, and the staff did exactly what they were supposed to do, and everybody in the school maintained safety, and it worked out well. So it's not just based on waiting for someone to tell us on the PA that there's a danger. It could be just hearing it and seeing it and alerting everybody else that there's a problem and we need to get out. So this goes back to alert, and ideally, again, the announcement would be made on the public address system. And what we would hopefully do in a situation, if it ever happened here in our district, is we're going to still use the term lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And staff and students have been instructed and will be trained and drilled on listening for those announcements. That's the code word we're going to use, even though it could create a little bit of confusion that, oh, lockdown, that means we hide in the safe room or hide under a desk and turn the lights out. No, it doesn't mean that. It means this is the time where we have to put this action plan into place and we revert to what we've trained on, and that's run, hide, or fight. And run being the first choice out of that. This is not a drill, this is not a drill, lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. And again, this all looks great on paper as part of a plan, but in the moment, the teachers and the students will know that when it's time to leave, it'll be time to leave. And we may not have the ability to get this message out like that. Teachers have spoken to us since we've implemented this plan and with great praise and thanks, saying, thank you, we appreciate this, we feel empowered, like we can make the best decision for our classrooms and get the word out to our students to keep them safe. We can still do a hold passing or stay in place. Typically, you may hear about these. They happen a little bit more frequently than you would think. This could be, as an example, if a student gets sick in the hallway, we don't want to expose that to other kids just before it's time to pass between classes. So we would still do a hold passing or stay in place until that has been cleared or rectified. I think we've used them a few times this year in a couple of different buildings for that very reason. A sick student. I think last year we had a staff member that was feeling ill, passed out, and to avoid the students from seeing one of their favorite teachers being carried out on a stretcher, which can be pretty traumatic, we did a stay in place, and it went right back to the school day once that was resolved. And we can still do those. So we can still cancel a stay in place with a PA announcement. So once that's over, the principal or the building administrator can get on the PA system and say, thank you, Monomoy, stay in place is now lifted, please go about your school business day. And business as usual would continue. A lockdown or an evacuation cannot be rescinded by a PA and can only be cleared by public safety officials. And if we had a reason to evacuate and do the full run, hide, fight, the building would likely be closed for the rest of the day, and the reunification process, which is an entirely different, would be an entirely different discussion, would be put into place. So the primary response, if you look at run, hide, fight, that is your selection menu. That's your selection. Run, hide, and fight. Your primary response is to evacuate. And again, the human natural instinct of fight or flight is going to kick in, and we'll get this going. So we're encouraging teachers to do a quick peek out their classroom to ensure that the route between their classroom and the closest exit is a safe way to go, and to take that in the swiftest way possible. If you've ever seen one of these drills, and there's some staff members I see, it's been described as a fire drill on steroids. It's a quick thinking, quick action drill that gets people out of the building as quick as possible. And we're close to 90 seconds, I think, for our evacuating our bigger buildings. We're encouraging them to take students to the safest direction possible. That doesn't mean the shortest, it means the safest. If there's an active threat out somewhere that can be seen, well, we want the staff and the students to run away from that danger. And again, that's part of the run, hide, fight. Exit the building, and we don't want them to stop. For typically a fire drill, they exit out the building, and they turn around and face the building and wait for instructions. These are going to be completely different situations. We don't want them to be in eyesight of the building. We want them to be in a safe place. And we want them out until they reach cover and are out of firearms range. Now, the discussion that I'm providing to you is certainly not the same language or delivery that we would give to our elementary students or our middle school students or even our high school students. The classroom teachers with public safety officials in Chatham, it's been myself and Lieutenant Justin Tavano from the fire department. The delivery is made as a partnership with myself, Lieutenant Tavano, and the classroom teacher in an age-appropriate discussion. We don't simulate any bad guys. We don't talk about bad guys at the younger levels. We generally talk about, hey, if our building ever became safe, what are some things that you could do? And the kids are smart and swift, and they come up with the right answers. So if there's any concerns about that, I can certainly speak with any of you to kind of allay those concerns, but we don't instill fear in the kids. We create an environment of preparedness as opposed to paranoia and being scared. Secondary response, if running is not an option, would be to go into the traditional lockdown. And the goal here would be for this to be a temporary lockdown until that person can run, until that classroom can evacuate, going back to the run option of the run, hide, fight. It's still an option, and enhanced lockdown is the key. And there's a couple of pictures in the slideshow that I'll show you that some classes came up with to enhance their ability to lock down. So typically in our classrooms, these are what some of the doors look like, and what they did was they took some coax cable and they tied that opening mechanism of the door down to prevent that door from opening, or at least slow it down from opening. We've learned from the training that I went through as part of the to be an Alice instructor, was even 5 or 10 seconds to slow down a violent intruder can give a classroom 5 or 10 seconds to go out another door, go out another window, and to get away from that threat. And on the lower picture, I think they took some, looks like some network cable, and they did the same thing. So not all the doors open out. Some of the doors open into the classroom. And what students have done in those situations is they've piled doors, cabinets, bookcases in front of those doors to slow intruders down. And these were taken in a drill that I think they did up in Norwood. I pilfered these pictures from another school district, but they were using the same exact protocols as we were. And they do slow people down as far as gaining access to classrooms. So the last resort, which again would be your fight or flight. If you can't flight, then fight is going to kick in. And I don't want anybody to think that we're teaching kids to bring in cans of peas or anything that they could use to try to fight an adult-sized intruder. That's not what we talk about. And I don't even think we use the word fight when we talk to the younger kids. I think we talk about counter or just defend. And the teachers, especially at the younger levels, are encouraged by the fact that those younger grades inherently give their trust to the teachers. And that is on our side in drilling and practicing for situations like this, because they generally don't ask any questions. They just do what needs to be done that the teacher tells them and directs them. And quite honestly, the younger kids evacuate quicker. They're a little smaller and they're easier to kind of get into a group and get out to the safe area. So we've talked to teachers about what are some of the things that they can do in classrooms if they were ever faced with a situation like this. Many classrooms have fire extinguishers. Many teachers have nice hot coffee for the day, or even a cold liquid can slow down an intruder or someone that's trying to do the class harm. There's many objects in the classroom that can be used as improvised weapons should they need to be. But again, this is the last resort, and this would be when you're not able to run. Hiding is not an option, and it's down to that very final immediacy that something needs to be done. And we hope it never happens, but we talk to teachers about this as a last resort response. And when we deliver this message, again, it's done with age-appropriate considerations. I have a kindergarten son and a second-grade daughter, so I'm very conscientious of how they understand things and how they perceive things and how messages need to be delivered to them so that they understand what I'm telling them and they don't get caught up in the why. They focus on the how, and that's certainly the more important aspect of this entire protocol is we don't need to worry about why. We can answer that question a little bit later. We need to focus on how and how to keep ourselves safe. The eventual police response, it's important for everybody to understand that the first priority is locating and neutralizing the bad guy. Statistically, it's been a lone wolf situation. There have been some outliers that were multiple intruders and assailants. Those are very, very rare. Officers, the first wave of officers may actually bypass injured people in their quest to put down the bad guy or the offender. The second wave of officers that respond is generally going to establish a perimeter to keep that building clear. And then finally, the deliberate search and rescue would follow the apprehension of the suspect once that person has been identified and neutralized. We have established rally points for each building. We actually put this to the test, I think it was 3 years ago, when the middle school had the threat made the Friday before school vacation, which was the coldest February day that I can recall. And our plan was still a draft at that point, and it worked really well. Students were bused here. The administrators from the central office were here with student information with portable laptops, and we initiated the reunification process. And I think it was shortly after 3 that we had everybody reunified with their family, and everybody was accounted for. So the rally points that we have initially are buildings that are nearby each school. However, that being said, the message that we deliver to teachers is if you can't get to your rally point that's been established, we just want you to get to a safe place and call 911. You will eventually be reunified and brought back to the reunification center, but I think it's important that teachers and students understand that they don't need to focus on, oh, this isn't the safe place I'm supposed to be, I have to get to the other place. If they're in a safe place, we want them to stay in that safe place. Certainly we can take the time and get them reunified a little bit down the road rather than risk having them go from one safe place to get to another safe place that they think they're supposed to be. And inherently they'll remain with the teachers, especially at the younger grades, so this would be fairly easy to accomplish. Public safety and public works personnel will work hand in hand to make sure that everybody gets reunified. We've had lengthy discussions with members of Highway Department and Parks and Rec to ensure that their availability in a situation like this would be there to help us get everybody reunified. So as we do drills, because these drills are not yet mandated in our state, fire drills, I think there's 4 that are mandated per school year, and there are no safety drills mandated. We have a goal to do, I think it's 2 or 3 each year. We'll let students know in advance that they're coming. We'll practice with the teachers in advance. I've actually had discussions at the middle school and the elementary school in Chatham for pockets of teachers to drill on their own. So the 4th grade wing, those teachers can get together and set 10 or 15 minutes aside to practice a drill just localized so that they know what needs to be done and they can identify any issues that we need to address. So then when we do the large-scale drill, those smaller areas kind of function independently and it all comes together into one giant successful drill. At any school, we will not use any simulated bad guys. There won't be anybody in a red man suit or camouflage running down the halls, wreaking havoc, increasing anxiety. There's enough anxiety with this topic already. We don't need to add to it. There will be no weapons shown. There will be no toy guns, no water pistols, nothing of any kind. We're focusing on the how to evacuate. That's our #1 goal, is to get everybody out of that building to a safe place as soon as possible. So any of the scary things that you may have seen on TV where some school districts have plastic bags from the supermarket with cans of peas and clam chowder that they can swing at an intruder, we're not doing that. We're focusing on evacuating. So that's not part of our drills at all. When we do a drill, the principal or the administrator will clearly get on the PA system and announce, this is a drill, this is a drill, this is a drill, lockdown, 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 this is a drill, this is a drill, this is a drill. Unlike a fire drill where we simply pull the alarm and everybody knows what to do, we're moving into this a step at a time, a little bit slowly, baby steps, so to speak, so that we don't hit them with things right away. As years go on, maybe at the middle school and the high school, we've talked about adding to this a little bit, maybe making, hey, this door's not safe, maybe putting a sign there that says, this door not safe, you need to go somewhere else, just to practice what that would be like. We've done that with fire drills in some of our schools, and it's been very successful. The students and the staff quickly revert to, okay, this is my primary exit, it's not going to work, I got to go to my secondary. So drilling on that is important, and we would look to do that as years go on to refine our skills and to make sure that we're as best prepared as we can be. So the evacuation during a drill, everybody will be encouraged to move swiftly but not run and create panic. Preliminary drills at the Lighthouse Charter School and Cape Cod Tech went very well with minimum confusion. And at the Lighthouse Charter School, they actually opened some windows and had some kids going out the windows. Of course, it's a one-floor building. We're not going to be doing that at all of our buildings. Students and faculty are only going to evacuate as far as the parking lot during a drill. And these are for the first drills. As we increase the frequency and the complexity of our drills, we would seek to go a little bit farther so that the students can actually experience that. And at the middle school, what we've done is the gym classes all have gone as far as the tennis courts on stepping stones, just to kind of get them in the habit of getting far away from the building. Because what we noticed when we did the first set of drills was everybody evacuated just like a fire drill and then turned around and faced the school building, which is counter to what we want them to do. But they've been drilling like that for fire drills since they were in preschool, and that's what they do. And we identified it, that's what they're trained to do. It's just something that they do, it's a reflex. So we want to make these types of drills as close to a reflex as we can without increasing the anxiety for the students. So the in-school training, as I said, will be primarily done by teachers with the assistance of police and fire personnel to show that there's a community partnership and that we're all in this together and that it is an important safety drill. The research does show that elementary students are exceptionally receptive to the instructions given by their teachers, and we're going to use that to our advantage by using the classroom teachers to help us deliver this message. Myself and Lieutenant Tavano are in the elementary school pretty frequently, so we're familiar faces. That certainly is key to getting this message delivered with as little anxiety as possible. And again, the important thing is the emphasis on the how rather than the why. We may never answer the question, why are we doing this? Why do we have to keep doing this? How do we solve this grand problem that we have? And frankly, that's not our issue to fight. We need to worry about the how. We'll be a part of the why, but we're going to focus on the how to keep our students safe. Parents at home, you're encouraged to have dialogue with your kids, asking them, hey, what are you doing if the building becomes unsafe? And you know your kids better than probably anybody, so bringing that up in a way that you feel is appropriate and is effective is going to help us at the school level deliver the message as well, so that they're getting that same message at home. If they get a mixed message, it could be a competition between the message at home and the message at school. So we hope that there's some dialogue at home that reinforces what we're teaching, and that parents recognize the importance and the effectiveness of the importance to get out of the building if it becomes unsafe. So each one of us could write a question down on a piece of paper and submit a what if, and we could be here all night talking about what ifs. There's a number of variables that could be introduced into any of these situations. Well, what if the fire alarm gets pulled? And so we could be here all night doing this. But what we've identified is that the run, hide, fight protocol is by far right now the best practice in our country as far as combating school violence. The preferred response of run, hide, fight is intended to provide guidance to encourage and empower everyone to react in a way that is most likely to increase the chances of survivability. We can't be there for every little situation. We can't drill for every little situation, but we can prepare in general what we think the best thing is. And teachers have collectively and for the most part, hey, we appreciate this. We find this much more valuable than just locking down. We feel like we have a choice in this, and we can do what we think is best. You may find that it's safer for one part of the building to lock down, whereas another part of the building it's safest to evacuate, and they have that ability. So that's where we're standing with run, hide, fight. I'm happy to take questions. I know there's Chief Gomez here, Lieutenant Considine, Captain DiPasquale from the fire department, Leanne's here from Harwich, so we're here. And before I take any questions, most of us have kids in the district, so we share your concerns as parents. As a public safety professional, I'm disgusted by what I see happening with school violence, and without politicizing it, yes, something has to be done. I don't know what that is. That's not my battle to fight. My battle to fight is to do my part to keep our schools as safe as we can. And as a parent, I stand behind this run, hide, fight. I stand behind our practices in teaching the students how it's done and what they need to know to keep themselves safe with the run, hide, fight protocol. I'm happy to take questions. If you want to reach out privately, I'm fine with that too. Yes, ma'am.
Any thought to putting in metal detectors?
So that would be a Superintendent Carpenter question. Would I be in favor of it? I'd be in favor of anything that increases safety in schools, and if that's something that the district decides to do, I'll be the first one to get trained in how to use it. But again, that's something for Mr. Carpenter, I think.
I think it's something to consider. And I also think that I go back and forth a lot of times when we look at it, when we look at school safety and say it's a balance between how do we help students feel safe day to day, and that I sometimes wonder about metal detectors and whether that starts with some students to give some feelings about the perceptions that their building might not be as safe as it is. I think that we have few situations with.
I disagree with that. It's like when you go to the airport. How many of us went through those metal detectors years ago and we were like, "Are you kidding me? Do we really have to take our shoes off?" And then there was all these things that happened. Now, when I go to the airport, I'm happy to spend an hour in line. Not really wanting to, but would you rather than know that something could get on that plane? It's the same thing.
Or in through the...
I mean,
I think some of it becomes the logistics of the detectors, and so I think it's a bigger question to kind of wrestle with on how practical it is. What's the cost and how one would go about managing detectors if you did have them in each of the buildings, and which buildings would you have them in?
Okay, so here's another question, and it may not logistically be feasible, but something that struck me when you said, and this doesn't really pertain to my daughter, although it does. I have a 9th grader who, her take on all of this is, I don't know why we had that drill. We have fire drills all the time. And you've just said yourself that children go out and treat it as if it's a fire drill and turn around and look at the building, because that's what we've all been taught to do from very young ages, as a fire drill. So in my mind, it sort of begs the question, well, why are we drilling on fire drills? If an evacuation of this nature serves the same purpose of getting the children out of the building, whether it's a fire or an intruder, it doesn't really matter. To me, it would make sense to drill to the more dangerous threat, the more extensive threat, especially when you have just said that the kids are treating it like a fire drill and turning around and looking at the building. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you know, my ninth grader didn't really appreciate the difference of it. So if you've got kindergarten children, why are they being taught to evacuate for a fire drill? Why aren't they just being taught to evacuate for a worst case scenario?
So
Go as far away and keep going. It serves the same purpose. It gets the children out of the building.
So I think your question is kind of in two parts, and I'll take the police part of it, and then I'll defer to somebody from the fire department. In the early drills, I think because it was a new thing, the quick go-to for the students was, oh, this feels like a fire drill. So I think they just get in that mindset to do that, which is why we've talked about increasing the number of safety drills that we do in our schools so that they are separate and independent events and drills from fire drills, and that there will become a more clear distinction. I think one of the only ways for that to really practically happen is for us to increase the number of drills that we do. And Dave, I think 4 fire drills are mandated by law. So if you want to take the other part about the fire drill.
Yeah, I'll just say we agree. One thing that we've been on top of is trying to ramp up both drills. For years, we would go to the schools and do a fire drill, and the kids would already be lined up at the door because they saw us coming. You know, and it's something that's always bothered me. And I've been part of this group since Columbine 20 years ago. And what we want to do is ramp it up. We've had some pushback in the past, but the administration that we have now is working with us to try to ramp these up. When we're doing drills in Chatham right now, we're blocking exits, we're grabbing kids, and we're going to introduce a smoke machine. I mean, those are things that your kids may be a little twisted up about it, but it's because it's become so complacent, we want to get away from that. So we think by the time they come to this school, they'll be much better prepared than they are now. But at those levels, we have to be careful because we don't want to horrify these kids. And that's where we've always got the pushback. But we have the administration now that's willing to work with us on that. And the run, hide, fight is another component. As a deputy chief, we were horrified about the lockdown and somebody pulls a fire alarm. Well, we understand it's only happened once in our country, okay? But my whole thing was, if somebody pulls a fire alarm, you get out of the building, right? But with run, hide, fight, you're getting out of the building, so it's not even an issue anymore.
Right.
That was one of the things that swayed me.
Well, that's what got me
Yeah,
thinking.
I watched us do these lockdown drills and I was really impressed. You could go in that school in 1 minute and it looked like a Sunday afternoon. You couldn't see a kid anywhere. Our teachers were so good at locking down these schools that I was one of the people that was like, why do we change it to run, hide, fight? Well, it makes so much more sense. And they had to drag me kicking and screaming, but I buy into it now. And again, part of it's the fire drill thing. But just know that we're going to be ramping things up, even in this school. We just did a drill last week, and it's still a little casual. There's still a little talking. There's still people on their phones. But we're ramping it up here, too. And we're going to ramp it up here more than we're going to ramp it up at the elementary and middle schools. But
Being a parent, I have to say, I agree that the younger ones are probably a lot more impressionable and a lot easier to train,
Right.
let's say,
But
than
we're trying to make
our
it so-
children
yeah.
who, have a hero complex and don't
yeah,
think
we're
that
trying to make
anything's
it, by the
going
time
on.
they get to this school, they're going to be much better trained than they have been in the past. And again, fire drills play a part of that,
Right.
just by ramping those up. But, you know, if we do 4 fire drills and we do 4 of these drills, which they've talked about doing at the high school level.
And I'm not saying don't
Yeah.
call it a fire drill, but why
Yeah.
not treat it the same way so that they're taught from a
Yeah.
young age to go as far away as
They
possible?
are different incidents, though. A fire drill is, it has to be organized chaos. An active shooter is chaos. It's get out.
Right.
The fire's in one part of the building. You don't
Right.
want people getting, you know, run over, and, you know, the alternative with a fire is, it's in one part of the building. So they are different incidents. I hope I answered your question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you did, Dave, thank you.
And I think another thing that we have tried to do is just to focus on teaching our students to be flexible in how they approach crises. So, you know, particularly we've been at the elementary level having the school resource officers working with individual classrooms to have conversations with the teachers and the students in the classroom to sort of think plastically when it comes to, you know, to a crisis, you know, to think about, you know, which, you know, where's the fastest way out, you know, where can you hide, you know, where are you going to go? So, you know, so they have, you know, I really applaud school resource officers for taking the time to go through class by class and have those conversations on a small group level and to start to think and to teach them to think, you know, to be plastic thinkers, so that as Dan says, that we've got that, you know, as those kids get older and older, there'll be more and more of them thinking, oh, here are the different options that I can exercise. And I think that's where something like Run, Hide, Fight does a great job. You're having your teachers and your students think about the different scenarios that can help them when it comes to school safety.
I think some of the kids, like my daughter came home that day and said, this was a joke. And then I sat her down and said, this is not a joke. And I think our kids who are in high school, I think we need to expose them more to the news so they can see, because they had 6 kids from the Florida school up at Harvard this week, or today or yesterday, talking about the incident. And if they see kids their age talking about this stuff, it's going to become more reality than if it's coming from an adult, I think. So I think it's a good idea that we let them, I mean, not that I can bet her, she watches whatever she wants on TV right now, but I think we should watch and encourage with the news, you know, so they can see it's not a joke. Because clearly these kids, the victims, have talked now. And it's not good.
You had a question there?
I do. Are there police officers in our schools now, all day, every day?
So the school resource officers are deployed a little bit differently by department. In Chatham, where I cover the Monomoy Middle School and the Chatham Elementary School, between the 2 schools, I try to spend 3 days a week. My chief, Mark Paulina, just got the approval to hire specifically a school resource officer, which will be a Monday through Friday thing at those schools. And it's 1 officer to serve 2 schools, but it's 5 days a week rather than the 3 days a week that I can try to give. I'm still a evening shift supervisor, so when I can modify my schedule or find time to go to the schools is usually when I do it. It's not a perfect solution, but it's going to be changing next year. In Harwich, Lieutenant Chief, if you want to discuss what you do in
Chief Dave Gilmet, first of all, I just want to thank you all for coming. This is a tremendous turnout. I know it's a very scary topic. I have a 19-year-old daughter. I was been involved in school safety since Columbine, and I know, you know, what goes through your mind as a parent. So just, you know, my pledge to you as the chief of Harwich PD, when I came here 3 years ago, you know, I encountered a very robust school safety program, and with pretty much everybody on board. And it's always evolving, you know, since Columbine. We've changed our tactics and our approach and everything, but you are a critical part of the team, so I'm really happy to see everybody here. Just having an adult conversation with your kids about what they say on social media and what they say to their friends, and about taking things seriously, and about keeping themselves safe, and about being aware of their surroundings and what's going on, and always thinking potentially what if. Not just in school, but out in the general public too, right? Those are the conversations I've had with my daughter. My son's 24 now. had those earlier with him. But to answer the question, we're in Harwich very committed to the SRO program. It was wonderful for me to find that when I came here. We have John Mitchell at the tech school, and that is every day. And we have Tommy Clark here at Monomoy, and that is every day. And Tommy has some, he will go to some of the other schools, the elementary school, when there are issues and cover that. So that's our deployment for SROs here. So mostly you're going to find Tom Clark here in this building, and you'll find John Mitchell at the tech school.
Yes, sir?
I got a question. Couldn't we have like a two-tone bell? Like in hospitals, you have codes. With your two-tone bell, you'd have one, you'd go strictly for the fire, the other one would be strictly for the scenario that you might have. That
So-
way you spread the word a lot faster, trying to hear a teacher, whatever,
Right.
you know what you're expected to do.
Right. The question, if anybody didn't hear it, was the possibility of establishing a two-tone bell system. One of the issues that we found out about some of our schools is that there's not PA systems in every room.
I got more of a pull.
Yeah, and you know, those are certainly things that are worthy of discussion. The confusion that the noise could create if there's another bell in the school that sounds for, you know, time to change classes, that's also a consideration, and it's not uniform in every building. There really are no bells at the middle school. There are no bells at the elementary schools. It's usually, we look at our clock and now it's time to change. So that could be a logistic issue. That's certainly something that, Scott, I don't know if you want to talk about.
Yeah, at the high school, when we built and designed this, there are actually in strategic areas of this building, there are distress buttons. So there is a button that can be hit in several of the faculty offices and administrative areas. So it would start that response, but it also is a direct line to public safety to notify them to start rolling.
When are they told to use that? Just for intruder?
So it's like
So it's okay.
literally it's labeled distress, and that's.
So it could be even like a health issue? Like, I've never heard of this until just now. My kid never told me this.
Well, I think the kids, it's in fact
Oh, it's more for the
spaces.
teachers.
Yeah, so-
Oh, okay, I thought the kids.
And I think for a health issue,
No.
typically they would call
No.
911 and get the fire department rolling and call the nurse.
Yeah, I won't help that, okay. That could be a problem.
Yes, ma'am?
I have two questions. One, what is talked about for playground safety? My daughter goes to Harwich Elementary, and it is extremely exposed to the road, to other buildings. I mean, what's to stop someone from,
Right.
God forbid, shooting them while they're at recess? I mean,
So-
not even in the building.
Yeah, I don't like playgrounds either for that very reason, but it's a school, and the design of our schools is not such so that we can magically transform a courtyard in between, you know, the confines of 4 huge walls into a playground. The schools are now being designed with that consideration in mind, but that's taking a long time, and it certainly adds expense to the building of schools. So on the playgrounds, I believe at both elementary schools and at the middle school where they have fresh air time as opposed to traditional recess, there's faculty outside that have portable radios that can communicate with the office, and if there's an incident there, they can quickly communicate that. The application of the run, hide, fight can work outside just as well as it can work inside. If you're in an area outside somewhere and that becomes unsafe, you run away. And where I saw that play out, and there was actually video of it, was that Washington, D.C. shooting with the congressman, where they were all on a ball field, where you can't get much more exposed than a baseball field. And what happened was they quickly identified those sounds as gunshots, and people sought shelter. So the discussion with teachers at the elementary school has been, if you're outside and there's an issue like that, you traditionally run to a place. And as an example, we can talk about Chatham Elementary School. The church across the street is a possible location for them to go. The fire department is a possible location for them to go. Of course, the route would bring them back in front of the school, but so those are discussions that we have with the teachers. It's not something that is overlooked by any means, but it's another variable that would fall into a what if. But a very good question, and the staff, knowing that they're empowered to make decisions on the fly in response to what they are immediately facing, has been very well received, and I think that's critical. What was your second question?
Has there been any discussion about arming a staff member in each school? As not just having the police, but having someone trained, ready to go to take out an intruder?
I don't know that there's been formal discussions about it. I know that that's also a Scott Carpenter question. I can certainly give you my opinion, but I'll defer that to Mr. Carpenter.
I think that's even beyond my pay grade. At the moment in Massachusetts, I think by statute, you can only have police officers in the building that are armed. I don't think there's the ability to have others with firearms on the school property.
That would be correct. I saw her hand first. I'll come to you next, sir. Yes.
So, this whole recess concept that we think of, would it be worth it to do drills at recess for these younger kids? Because I see my daughter, who's in first grade, God forbid, they're all out there in grade, and they're all spread out. If something goes down, it's great for the students to know what you're talking about, but they're not with their class.
Right.
They're all spread out, they're not gonna know what to do.
So when Deputy Chief DePasquale was talking about ramping up drills, that's one of the things that we're going to consider is doing drills during lunch, which is something that we haven't traditionally done, but it certainly creates another variable that we have to consider. They don't normally evacuate from lunch. We usually schedule it at class time, but scheduling it during recess is something that we definitely want to do, which is why we feel as a crisis team, and most of the public safety officials and the administrators that you see here are part of the Tier 1 crisis team, where we discuss these things, we look at best practices and try to implement them as best we can for our district. And that's one of the reasons that we want to increase the number of drills that we do, so that early on in the year, we maybe start out with a basic drill, and as drills go on, we add those added variables to the drill, so that those are things that we consider. That also is not something that's been overlooked. Sir.
More of a clarification question on the Capitol baseball game scenario, the example you gave. I believe there were numerous Capitol security guards with weapons there too, so not sure whether just the one thing of flee and run worked, other than they had Capitol Police there to help them along also secure the situation.
That certainly worked in their favor, and again, short of putting police officers, 3 or 4 of them at each school in various places, which I don't know is being done just about anywhere, certainly in a district our size, that would be a huge policy change and a huge expenditure that would certainly be on my pay grade.
It just seems that it'd be easier to have a full-time resource officer at each door, front and back, than it would be to, metal detectors are a great idea, but the logistics of that, every pen the kid carries in, you would have to be taken out. But you need 2 hours to start the day.
Yeah.
It would seem to me it would be less expensive to hire full-time resource officers like that, and more than one. I know the Florida incident, they had 3,500 kids, I believe, in that school, with only one security officer. That seems crazy. It seems crazy that it's 1 for 620 or so, plus teachers here.
Well, I'm definitely an advocate for putting police officers in each school, and I'll go out on a limb here and give you my personal opinion about arming teachers. If you're going to arm someone that's going to be in a school, I want them to be wearing a police uniform with the training and experience to de-escalate student situations, to de-escalate angry parents, None of you in this room so far, which is nice. But to have that training so that it's not just, well, we've got teachers that have done, so our kids are that much more safe. I don't know that that's anything that's going to happen anytime soon. And as Scott pointed out, by statute, only police officers can legally possess firearms on school grounds. But I started becoming involved in school-based policing in 1999. So I've had experience at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools, preschools. So I've seen the differences in each building. And one of the things last year I had the, I don't know if you call it good fortune, but I actually had a chance to meet Frank DeAngelis, who was the principal at the Columbine. And talking to him, as a cop in the schools and as a dad with kids in the schools, it's mind-blowing what he experienced as the first real visible school shooting that we all kind of experienced as onlookers, and the change that came about. And there certainly weren't enough changes because we are where we are today. And just as recently as yesterday, there was a school shooting, which fortunately was resolved within a minute by an armed school resource officer who ran toward when he was told that there was shots being fired. And I don't want to discuss the Florida incident. I don't like what I've seen so far, but I know as much as you do about that from reading it in the papers. And the school resource officers that I work with and the police officers that I work with are all dismayed and disgusted at what is being reported to have not happened in that situation. So that's just my personal take. So thank you for giving me my soapbox.
Maybe on that same note, our schools are locked, which is great. I'll just use elementary school as an example. So I go and I volunteer every Wednesday in my daughter's classroom, push the button, can I help you? I'm here to volunteer, come on in. Well,
No need.
I'm here to drop off paperwork, I'm here to be a teacher, I'm here to come on in. You know, they remember,
They see you though. This is a video, right? A camera.
I've been there when they haven't let people in who they do, or they've asked for more information. But they don't recognize it, but they have that camera right there. That's a concern.
Yeah.
Are they just letting anybody in? Obviously, they don't know who I am.
Right.
So I totally different when they said.
They don't let me in.
That's true.
I had to buzz and buzz out here the other day.
That's never happened to me. What happens? So if someone comes to the door, are they trained? I don't recognize this person. I don't know if we can answer that, but do they just say, well, what are you here for, or we need more information? How does that unfold?
Yeah, I've been in the office in at least 2 schools when something like that has happened, and the office staff did not recognize the person that was at the camera and spoke to another spoke to another staff member in the office. Is that somebody you're expecting? And I've also had situations where I've been walking out of a building and a parent, and I think I even recognized someone that's in this room that I had this awkward encounter with, where I was leaving and they were coming in, and I recognized them, but I still did not hold the door for them. I wasn't being impolite, I was being...
That was me.
Sorry.
Jordan said, I guess I'm supposed to do that, and I said, yeah.
Right. I said they'll buzz you in.
Yeah, that's the right thing to do.
Right. So that works. And again, the school day is a fairly short period of time in the grand scheme of things. But there are so many comings and goings with visitors, and that's a genuine concern. And I don't know that that's going to change, but I know that it has changed since, I would say, within the last 4 years. I can remember when I first arrived at Chatham Elementary School as the school liaison, there was a podium much like this with a sign-in sheet, and parents would come in with no review whatsoever, write their name down, and just, they were into the building. And I watched that in disbelief, and shortly after that, I became a very unpopular person with that particular principal, and pointed out some of the many security issues that were inherent in that situation, and it changed. But that's something that the staff is very cognizant of, and we've talked with the office staff, certainly at the elementary school, and I get it, you know, kids forget books and backpacks and things like that, and they need to get them. I'm what you would call a school resource officer radical, where I think that you as a parent, unless you need to come into the building, meet with a teacher or a staff member, hi, I have little Johnny's backpack. Okay, leave it right there. We'll send somebody up to get it. Thank you for dropping it off. Will we get to that point? I don't know. I would be in favor of it, but that's not overlooked either. Yes?
It's not necessarily the front door, though.
Right. So as part of what I do at each school periodically during the day, and I know Tommy does it as well, a perimeter sweep of the building to make sure those doors are closed and locked. This is actually the time of year where teachers are sometimes, or even students, sometimes prop a door open. Well, not today, but in a normal March or April, those doors might be inclined to be left open for fresh air. And I've already reached out to both of our building principals in Chatham, letting them know that if they get, teachers that are going to be doing that, I'm going to be closing those doors and following up with them about why they're closed. And that goes for one of the things at the elementary school is the cafeteria door. Deliveries come at all different times of the day, and sometimes that door is open. So we've redone how we do that so that we have a staff member at the door when the delivery person arrives, the provisions are brought into the building, and then that door is secured as it needs to be. And that's something that we look at all the time and make sure that buildings, doors and windows are closed as they need to be. And on the, in the evenings, that's, our schools are regular locations for building checks to make sure that those doors are secured when custodians are inside doing their thing. Because there are alarms, but those are great, but we don't want people to get in anyway to be in the building. Yes?
Just going back, talking about that, because I have kids at the elementary, middle, and the high school level, and I know, especially like the middle school level and the elementary, I have a son at Chatham Elementary, like Thursday mornings, he has 7 a.m. trumpet, so I literally just pull up, he jumps out, runs right in the building. Whereas normally, like school hours, you got to push the button, let him in. And then I have a son at the middle school, same thing, he does before school clubs, pull up in front, he just runs. So is there, I mean, I'm just saying anyone can just, almost seems like they can just go into the building at 7 o'clock in the morning. I mean, I know that there are teachers there and stuff, but it's not fully the full staff. Is there any kind of, I don't know, just extra security or extra monitoring at those early, before school hours at all? Like I said, I'm always running late, so I usually don't walk my kids in. I just open the door and they run in. But I have noticed, I know, like I said, sometimes I just see him, and he doesn't stand there pushing a button. He can just open the door and run right into the school.
Right. And I think that goes to the logistics of fundamentally running a school. Okay. And you want it to be a welcoming building for the students, but at the same time you have to balance security.
Exactly.
Security and safety considerations. So those are all things that staff are aware of, and I know that moving forward from here, a lot of good questions have been asked and a lot of good suggestions. And when we meet as a crisis team, I'm sure these will be revisited. As to, are we going to change policies? Are we going to staff doors? That's something that Mr. Carpenter would certainly need to weigh in on from a district level. But I do want to impress that our schools are as safe as any other public school in the country, where schools take reasonable steps to keep them safe. We've gone a long way in a short period of time, and some of it has been reactive, some of it has been proactive, but I'm happy as a parent as to where we are with school safety and security. Yes, sir.
You were mentioning the problems with metal detectors. I mean, we're in a society now where you can't go in a federal building without going through a federal detector. They put thousands and thousands of people through airports. There's not a great delay on it. We're all getting better at going through airports. We know the routine. I'm a big advocate of putting a metal detector at any place where you're going to have people coming into the schools or any of the schools. And I don't see it as going to be a problem about some pen triggering a medical detector. So I think that, and I don't think these kids are going to be traumatized by going through metal detectors as we're starting the day of school. So it's a fact of life today.
Yeah, but if someone's going to shoot, they're going to just blow right through it. They got to.
Well, I mean, you can have a check area where you have the metal detector. The person goes in, it goes off. You shut the thing down. There are ways of doing it.
I guess, yeah. I mean, I guess someone.
If you're going into like a vestibule, you got the metal detector. You have a locked door. It automatically, if the guy pushes a button, it's locked. You're not going anywhere.
So this goes back to the balance between the number of school threats that come from outside people as opposed to the ones that start from inside. Historically and statistically, the number of outside threats outweigh the number of inside threats, but that's a very good point. And when it comes to metal detectors, that's, you know, I'm not trying to pass everything to Scott, but Sergeant Bill Massey, I can't.
Actually, I like everything you said.
Okay.
I'm very happy with it.
Thank you. So those policy changes would have to be done, you know, at the district level between the superintendent, the school committee, and at the will of, you know, you folks as voters. I just broke the computer. Okay. But by and large, most of the threats come from outside the building, and that's a great point that you made. A determined person is going to get access to that building if they're that determined, which brings me back to the run, hide, fight protocol. When and if, God forbid, that happens, the students in the Monomoy district are trained and the staff is trained and encouraged to think on their feet and do what's best in that moment. We go to great lengths to keep people out of our buildings, and again, I apologize for not letting you in, but we go to those lengths to keep people out for a very specific reason, so that we can control the activity inside the building. And great point, if somebody is determined enough to get in, they're going to get in, which is another reason why, and I know Melissa's going to talk about this, the crisis team and the support that's available to the students inside, and certainly I can't speak for what happens in our communities, but when we see threats of people that are potential issues in our school community, those are acted upon and those are addressed. So great point about metal detectors, minimal disruption. Great point about determined people wanting to get in. Yes, ma'am.
My daughter's in her first year of middle school and has expressed concern that she hasn't drilled in her new school yet. Is that on the agenda too?
Absolutely. We share with our students our sequences. We train staff, we train students, we train parents. This is the last of those 3 steps. Once that happens, everyone knows what's going on.
There may have been some localized drills or training done in classrooms, but as Mr. Wilson pointed out, the school has not done theirs, and we have it on the calendar, I believe. Right.
And
yes.
Bill, just one thing really quick. I think to the question about what happens when middle schoolers, Rebecca, what happens when a middle schooler's running in before school? It doesn't matter which building you come into. Your student is going to encounter some adults. Some of the kids are going to come into middle school. Their routine is they walk in that door. They get routed to the cafeteria, and there are adults there. And if you're coming in the high school, if you're coming in the back door, you'll bump into Jamie Girolamo, and it's actually an important safety thing that's happening there. There's this triage that's happening the moment a kid's walking in the door and they've got this. You can tell the kid's having a bad day, and there's sort of a communication that starts to go through the building. Okay, Sam needs some support. Can somebody check in on him? So so you have those check-ins that are happening as the massive communities coming into any of our buildings. You have friendly faces that are there that are interacting with the kids, and you pick up a student that's off, and I think it does get to a lot of the things that Melissa can talk about in terms of the mental health aspects of this.
I noticed, thanks for bringing that up. I noticed that the after school, when I pick up my daughter, you just go right in and find her and go around. Is there any plans on that for all the programs after school? Yep.
I think that's one that we'll have to talk about, and on sort of the crisis team level. I think one of the challenges all of our buildings have after school is we sort of shift from school proper to becoming this community center for so many different things. The high school, we've got athletics happening left and right with kids coming to us from other schools, and the same with the middle school, and different community events. And it's how do we go provide both that security at the same time while you're also opening the buildings up for the myriad of different events that are happening after school.
But those are still school-sponsored events, and I brought this up to you before. I think you know that. that bothers me as a parent, that at 3:15, there's probably more than 100 kids in here right now with indoor tryouts and the band rehearsing right now. And anybody can walk in that back door, and even more so tonight, we all came in. There wasn't anybody there greeting us. To hell with the meetings down there, there was no official response. Anybody can walk in that door, and I don't know what the answer is. We've discussed this before, whether it's a swipe card or whether it's a fingerprint entrance for kids. I don't know what it is, but that seems like a hole in the system that can be taken advantage of by somebody, by a bad guy or a bad kid.
I've done it before. I've done it before in the middle of the day. Coming here, my daughter was in 6th grade. She was coming here for chorus, and I was volunteering. I walked in the back door. I know this high school in and out because my daughter's danced and done recitals here. I walked in the back door, and I went straight to the band room. And then I stopped for a minute, and I said, that's not right. And I marched myself to the front desk and said, so hopefully we've cracked down a little bit since then. That was 3 years ago. But to this gentleman and to everybody else is, just because school hours end at 3:15, and I know how dedicated you are. I've seen the hours that you've put in over the years from Chatham L all the way through. You can't do it all, but our kids are here from 7 o'clock in the morning till, I don't know, 7 o'clock at night, 5 o'clock.
Sometimes later.
Yeah.
Games.
Hi.
How can people who do not have kids in the schools, but still care about the kids in the schools, how can we help?
So that was a question that has come up, and I think it even was brought up that could parents in shifts volunteer to stand outside doors and act as, pseudo security people. We haven't yet really talked about that, and I think that's something that you would need to probably discuss with the school committee, and there's background checks that need to be done. But
I also think, I know the high school put something out, I think it was yesterday, just to news about a parent that was having a conversation with their child at home, and their child brought up a safety concern. I think just the fact that parents have conversations and you keep those open lines of communication there, and we try to emphasize with the students, if you see something that's concerning, say something. And really, in that case, a student talking to their parent, and their parent then reaching out to both the local police department and the school, so that we could go and address it. Thankfully, knock on wood, it wasn't a situation involving one of our students, but it also helped us then notify a neighboring school district of a child that was in crisis, that was spiraling down in the realm of social media.
Are the teachers allowed to talk to the parents about safety protocol? Just because I know I emailed my daughter's teacher once about it, and I heard nothing back. And at the end of the day, her life is in her teacher's hands. And I kind of would like to know and have the confidence that she's going to save her life. And I heard nothing. Are they allowed to communicate with us, or is that off the table?
So I think the answer is yes, and I think I had after Parkland, one parent emailed me, saying they were looking for sort of the exact protocol on everything that's going to happen, and I had written back to the parent just saying that the challenge is you don't go and publicly go and say, here's where we're going to be exiting the building, and here's our rally point, because that's something that in the worst case scenario, somebody could go and use that against our staff and students. So the answer is yes, and there's sort of a point at which you don't go and divulge everything that you're going to do, but I expect that they could have the exact same type of conversation that Sergeant Massey had with everybody here tonight.
yes. Yes, typically it's gone out at least a week ahead of time that a drill is scheduled. I don't know that the specific time is provided, but it's not, if you're connected to the school and you're on the notification list, the first time you hear about it won't be when they come home and say, guess what happened today? You'll know about it ahead of time, so that you can kind of prepare and maybe lay some groundwork ahead of time. That's one of the great times to have that fortified discussion, the reinforced discussion at home about, well, hey, I hear you have a drill coming up. What do you think you're going to be doing? So that would be very helpful in reducing the anxiety and increasing the awareness of what students are expected to hold.
So why don't we just do one more question, and I just want to make sure that we give Melissa a chance
Sure.
To talk, and then afterwards I'm happy to stay as long as we need, but I'm also welcome to anyone email questions to us and happy to respond to it.
As am I. Yes.
You mentioned the crisis team a few times. Can you explain that?
So there's different tiers of our crisis team. The school resource officers, the administrators, some of the custodial staff, the head custodians, and a couple of other key people in administration are part of the Tier 1 crisis team, which really kind of lay the groundwork for what our responses will be to certain situations. And outside of that Tier 1, there's a couple of other tiers where it's more of support staff, where members of the community would be used in a debrief situation. The Tier 1 crisis team met the day after the Sandy Hook incident, which was a weekend, and we were all getting emails from parents and families. So we wanted to make sure that, hey, this is something that we need to discuss, because certainly that was not anything that anybody was prepared for, at least prepared to have to discuss like that. So they look at best practices as a group. We established a flip chart that's in each classroom of every building, and we've done very well communicating to teachers and staff that it's not something that, oh yeah, you look at once and you hang it up and never refer to it. It's a living and breathing thing that we encourage teachers to look at from time to time and be familiar with. It outlines specific responses and what steps to do in case of a threat is made in the classroom. There's a threat of self-harm. There's indication of self-harm, who to call, what to do. So the crisis team is really out front of staying apprised of best practices and communicating those to staff at the district level. So there's membership from each school on that. Does that help? Okay. Melissa?
And just to add on to our district crisis team, it's actually 22 members on public safety and administrators and faculty, but we also work closely with Safe and Supported Schools through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to make sure that we have all the updated information and that we're getting training and making sure that we have the information needed for our schools. So our crisis team is an incredibly robust team, very active, very involved. And again, we just met recently after the Florida incident as well, and brainstormed quite a few of the questions that you've brought up tonight. We actually had those same questions, and we'll continue to talk about those issues as we meet throughout the year. So one of the things I want to talk a little bit about as well is kind of the mental health aspect, because it's certainly a big issue that we're facing. And we also know that there are mental health issues that are associated with many of these incidents. So a couple things. One, within our schools, we have an incredibly talented and dedicated group of clinical folks, between school psychologists and adjustment counselors and guidance counselors who are working with all of our students. And as many of you probably have communicated with our counselors. And they're always receiving training and always on top of, what are the issues that some of our kids are faced with, and making sure that they have those supports. We also have, for parents, we have 2 courses that we offer. One is mental health first aid. I don't know if anyone here has taken it to date, but it's offered 3 times a year. That's an 8-hour course, and it's an international course. But what it's really to provide you is with opportunity to learn about signs and symptoms and how to develop an action plan if you're faced with any type of mental health crisis. And one of the things that is impressing me most tonight is what we do know is that protective factors, the more we have of those, meaning you being here tonight and learning about how to keep our schools safe, how to talk to your children, how to make sure that you're connected with our schools and community is a protective factor. And the more protective factors we have, we know really decreases those opportunities for mental health crises. So I'm impressed that you're here and happy to be able to share this information with you. So I do offer the mental health first aid course 3 times a year, so I send that out and through parent notification. So that's one way that you can become more informed. It's a free course. We're also doing a course that's an anti-addiction course through Boston Life Skills, but it's not just anti-addiction, it's a course that really talks about, you know, how do I monitor my kids? How do I communicate with my kids? How do I become a good role model for my kids? Because that's where, again, that's going to increase that protective factor for our kids in making sure that all of them are safe. But not just your own child, but, you know, our community. So all of the kids are in our community, and we all need to look out for all of them. So we have those things that are available for parents. We also have resources, and I didn't even imagine to make enough copies for the number of people that are here tonight. But what I will do, because originally I was going to say write your name down, but I think that might take you all night as well, is my email is mmaguire@monomoy.edu. And so I do have some information that's helpful, especially signs and symptoms that you might want to start looking for, especially in our adolescents, if you're not familiar with some signs and symptoms. But just some helpful tools that I can share with you. I'll post them on the website as well, but feel free to email me anytime to ask about resources, or if you have questions about any of the mental health issues that we're faced with and how we're dealing with them. I'm happy to answer those questions anytime. So if there are questions for that component, I mean, we could talk probably all night about that as well as the questions you have for, you know, the safety protocols.
I have a question. So I have a freshman, and when Parkland happened, I was hysterical. I was crying, and she's like, "Mom, we have drills all the time. Don't worry about it." Now, I don't want her to worry about it all the time, but I don't want her to have that relaxed attitude that I'm not worried about it because I do drills. So how do I express that to her without freaking her out?
So I think, and this is a conversation we've had recently in a course that we're doing with parents, is, you know, building that trusting relationship with your child and having that open and honest communication about how you're feeling is equally as important about knowing how your child is feeling when they're stressed. So it's okay to have a conversation with your child that I'm really, you know, nervous, I'm scared, I'm frightened about what I'm hearing or what I've seen. How are you feeling about that? You know, what are you doing to feel safe, to feel good? What strategies are you using, or have they taught you at school? Do you mind if I call you a guidance counselor? They're all great conversations to have with your kids, most definitely. So one of the things that I was impressed with the last time the think tank happened here 2 weeks ago.
Snowstorm.
I think a few weeks ago, you know, and what I was most impressed with is the honesty of the students that were here talking about how they have become complacent and they do need to become more aware. And I think that is in their mind. And I don't necessarily think they are at the freak out level yet, because the other thing that they said is, we feel so safe in this building. And that was a theme from the students. That's what we want them to feel. We don't want them to be complacent, so we do want to have that conversation. So, well, tell me, what would you do though, really? What if? And that's okay to have that conversation.
Because I also said to her, you know, you have to look out for you when this happens. And I'm not trying to be mean about her friends or other people, but my main concern is her, and that's what I told her. I said, you know, you need to do what you do. Don't worry about that puppy in the corner or that, you know, book that you might have to replace. We'll replace whatever, you know, but we can't replace you. Is that bad that I said that to her, or?
There's nothing bad about having an open, honest conversation with your child about what your feelings are, okay? As long as, you know, you're having that reciprocal conversation about how do you feel about that? What do you think about that? Tell me what you would do or how you would feel if this situation really occurred. And those are great conversations to have. So I would never, you know, I do see a couple parents here that are in that course with me, and this is what we're talking about, you know, really building that that communication, that trusting relationship, so that you can have exactly what you said, this is the way I'm feeling, this is what I feel you should do, but make sure you have the question come back to you from them of how they feel.
I'm curious if there's been any changes or what you do or what the police do when a student or whomever is identified as having, a mental health issue. Like that student in Parkland everybody was talking about it, but not together and doing anything about it, seemingly. So I'm just curious if we put in steps for that.
So we have, I think, just an incredible clinical team, and all of the things that we're doing to address mental health in this district are just, quite frankly, on the forefront of other schools. So we're doing more than what you might see in other schools, because we recognize that mental health challenges, whether it's behavioral, emotional, social, any of these challenges that students are having require support, but it also requires training. So, we're doing a lot of training for our staff, and I'll give you an example. We're part of a grant that our entire faculty, everyone from the custodians to cafeteria to everyone in this building on October 5th will receive a training called what's called collaborative problem solving through Mass General Hospital, through Dr. Albon. And this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for staff to become more informed about, how are my kids behaving? What am I noticing? What am I observing? What are things that I need to really understand that's happening? I'm sorry, I feel like my back is too. So that we can identify when there is a crisis or a challenge and make sure we're putting in the proper supports and services. We are constantly using our school resource officers. We have Gosnold in our buildings that provides counseling for students who won't otherwise be able to attend counseling outside of schools. We partner, with Sheeler House. We partner with Sue Landers, and of course all of our public safety. But we have a lot of supports and services available for our students and for our staff. So we are definitely there in evaluating, identifying, and making sure that we're accessing the proper resources for students. And I would agree, because most people would say that, well, somebody should have known that this kiddo had some issues. And I would agree that we can identify that. So all of the training and work we're doing at even the elementary levels are allowing us to identify and support.
Can I add to that?
Absolutely.
Oh, I might even be loud enough without that. I have that mom voice too. I am Kristen Hayden. I am the school counselor at the middle school, but I'm also a parent, so I have 2 kids here in this building. So my response to that, everything that Melissa said is true in terms of who we are and what we're doing, but it's also a partnership with all of you, because you have them when they're not with us. So I would just like to stress that communication with us, even if you think it's the smallest little thing, might not be something small. It might add on to something that we've already noticed. So please reach out to us and encourage your kids to do so. I have those conversations with my kids all the time. Have you noticed something different about so-and-so? Or if they come and throw something out, I might ask a few more questions. So I just want to add that it's a partnership.
That's good.
This is more of a logistic question that was brought to mind on the subject of telling our children to take care of themselves. The one thing that struck me as absolutely terrifying was all the cell phone footage and videos of that classroom shooting, and I'm just wondering if there is, if cell phone usage during drills or active shootings, or if it's been addressed. Because I know whether they're supposed to have their cell phones with them or not, they do. And they're on. And even if it's on vibrate, they're still, so is this being introduced into the drills? Maybe not at the elementary school level, but at the middle school and high school level?
I'll let Mr. Carpenter answer that. But just on the other piece too, and just to be aware of that, as much as the students are using their phones, what we're also finding is parents, because rightfully so, we're very scared, are texting for,
I'm calling. It
emailing
would be-
and calling their kids. So we have to definitely have that conversation.
From both sides.
Yeah, I think that the mindset of, if we go back to the run, hide, fight, there ideally isn't time to go be texting and using your cell phone. It's get out of the building. And I think the challenge we have in modern society with cell phone use is, and I unfortunately know this from firsthand experience, there are so many kids with cell phones, and when something really bad happens, you will likely be reaching out to your child. They'll likely be reaching out to you, and it's entirely possible that the entire grid starts to kind of come down because there's so much traffic concentrated all at once. So I think just the take home is, what we are imparting on kids. It's like we're leaving as fast as we can. We're not stopping to go take footage. And
Can we just impart to our children to turn the phones off in the event of a drill, or?
We do tell them to do that.
It's very black and white thinking, because isn't their cell phone also a manner in which they could get help if there was a situation? Let's say you're in the bathroom and you see somebody doing something, you may not be able to immediately find an adult or, ring an alarm, but you could press that button on your phone that sends something. So there is always.
So if you're in a lockdown situation, you wouldn't want your child to turn off his or her phone?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Oh, because that's exactly how they would find you, with a phone buzzing or going off.
I feel as though the phone should be silenced while you're at school, but I don't particularly think it should be turned off, especially if it is a means for getting help or for alerting people.
So just, if I could just jump in real quick, when we do the drills at the schools, and the cell phone issue is not an issue at the elementary school, thankfully, yet.
It's not an issue at the high school right now, during the drills.
Right.
It's something that the teachers are aware of, and we're aware of, and I didn't see any kid.
No.
Yeah, I mean, we yell at them. Get off your phone, it's time to get out. You want to call when you get out there. If there's an incident, that's fine. But during the incident, we want you to get out. That's part of the run, hide, fight.
And that's
all the
focus
teachers
on the
are
how.
aware of that too, and the teachers are the ones that usually say something. But this last drill, we didn't see anybody on the phone. I mean, where I was or where she was.
Yeah, I can
But
remember.
we saw the footage on TV, right? We saw the footage of high school students using their phones or calling or.
We can only work to teach them what we're trying to teach them.
Well, that's what I'm asking, is if it's being addressed.
Right.
Yeah, we reinforce it during the drills, so there's no question in every building. So, this one is the toughest one because more kids have cell phones. But
Oh, believe me, we
we're
know.
on them about that.
But I agree, it's a hard thing, because if they run, like we're really teaching them, you want them out of here. And if them giving you a phone call from somewhere in Harwich Center is what they have to do.
Yeah, I mean, I don't particularly want them using their phone in that scenario, but would I like there to be a way to track them, or would there be a way to call for help if they were alone or in a situation spotting something? I'd rather they have the option and me teach my children. You don't fool around, you don't sit there and record things, and you don't send out text messages and stuff while you're in the middle of the drill. But, and hope that that becomes something that's instilled in them, but while giving them the option to still have, that my kids don't have cell phones yet.
And that's something that I think we're all looking for when we're doing these
Yes.
drills. I mean, we're at every entrance, there's tons of us here when we're doing these drills, so there's eyes everywhere.
When we started them, there was a lot of talking, a lot of laughing. It was a 5-minute social hour.
Right.
We think we've gotten way past that. Kids really do a good job, and the teachers really do a good job.
Well, I mean, I would hope so too, and I would think that it would be common sense too, but then we saw that footage of those teenagers taking videos, so if it's happening there, you know.
We have a question back here. Just-
This is regarding mental health in general. Monomoy does have students from other cultures in all of its schools, so what is being done to reach those parents who might not speak English as a first language, who might not understand what's going on or need a little bit of extra awareness?
So we certainly employ interpreters and translators for families who speak other languages. So that is always available for any parent to have a meeting if they have more questions or would like more details, to be able to have any information in their home language.
I have an idea. Just on the point of social media, I think really we can all agree that that's an underlying issue. Kids' psychological well-being. And I'm just wondering if maybe as a community and school we could come together and figure out a way to help our kids through this. You know, I think I just see we're in a new age. I see amped up psychological issues. I think the studies are showing that there's an increase in depression, suicide,
anxiety
related to social media. Yeah, it's kind of an animal. And I think maybe as a community, as parents and as a school, it'd be good to have some sort of forum, or we could maybe talk about it together and address it.
I think that's a great idea, and actually, Jim Burkeville and myself actually just had this conversation today in talking about, having a parent university and looking at social media. And as much as we say that the other part of me, in terms of the mental health part, is that we need to monitor our kids. We need to make sure that we are as connected as they are, because this is actually the world we live in, and it is part of, our global economy and what our kids are going to be moving out into. And so we need to be able to teach that good digital citizenship, and we need to help you understand what that looks like. So we're definitely committed to doing some parent universities about, first of all, how do you set up your own accounts so that you know how to navigate it, but then how do you monitor your child? I'm really not looking. All right, I am. But that having that really, really honest conversation with your child, that I want your passwords. I want to be able to, if you're going to have an account, guess what? I'm going to have that account with you. And that's going to be a non-negotiable. And this is what we talk about in the parent course, is how do you do that? And how do you make sure that your kids are feeling safe and secure? Not that you don't trust them, but there are things that are going on out there that you are concerned about. It's okay to share that you are concerned about things that are happening. So it's a great idea, and we are absolutely committed to doing that, so that there is an understanding. And then so kids also understand that you know how to navigate those social media sites, and that you are monitoring, because kids want to feel safe. So that's a great idea. So thank you.
What kind of language is being used with the elementary age students? I hear the word, the phrase "bad guy." So what are we saying? That watch out for the bad guy, you run out of the building because they might shoot you? I mean, like I don't let my kids watch the news right now because they're too young. So I guess I'm asking, how do I say to them that they're...
So the answer to both of those questions is neither. Bad guy was for your benefit.
Right.
We don't talk about the potential of somebody shooting at them. We don't want to put that idea in their head.
So what do we say that...
So we're talking about anytime our building becomes unsafe.
Okay.
What are some examples, and we get them from the kids, what are some examples of when this building could become unsafe?
Okay.
And there was an incident a couple of years ago when there was a bird flying around the elementary school, and that seems to be their go-to. Well, if another bird makes it into the building, and okay, yep, that could be, but, and I used that, I stole it from them, I did, I have to say I stole it from them. I said, well, what if it's something bigger? Like a dog that you're not familiar with.
Right.
Would that be something that makes the building unsafe? Well, yeah, okay, so that would be something. Can you think of anything else? And somebody said, and I did not rehearse this with that third grader, and she said, yeah, somebody that doesn't belong here. What do you mean by doesn't belong here? Well, that's not part of our school. That isn't a parent or a teacher or somebody that we trust. Yes, that would be somebody that you're unfamiliar with that is making you uncomfortable or making the situation or the school dangerous. Then yes. We don't use bad guy. We don't use, what if somebody comes in and starts shooting the place up?
Right.
Absolutely not.
Okay, good.
And again, the discussions at the elementary school are much more intimate with smaller groups of kids than they are at the other grades. In the high school, the first time we rolled out anything regarding lockdown or run, hide, fight, a high school student raised his hand and he said, Officer Massey, I got to be honest with you. If something like that goes down here, I'm smashing that window out and I'm going out. Okay, so you don't need me. That was already in their mind, and they were very connected, and, we're always gonna play second fiddle to social media. We're always gonna be not defending it, but we're always gonna be providing some appropriate guidance for what's seen on social media. So, to answer your question, at the younger grades, we're talking in general about what would make the situation unsafe. And then we revert back, it's a great segue because we revert back to, but ideally kids, you wanna listen to your teacher. Does everybody understand that? You wanna listen to your teacher? Yep, because they're gonna know what's best. Right, exactly. And we use that to our advantage in getting this message across. And the teachers help us get the kids to focus on the how and not the why. Does that help?
Definitely.
Great.
Yeah.
Good.
Just to raise a quick awareness of something, I know you had mentioned about social media, and I think one of the things that we're really blessed with in our towns is we have the Harwich Youth Counselor, Sheila House, who last year had a showing of the film Screenagers and started a conversation on the sort of digital challenges our children are having these days. And I think one of the things that I look at today's group, I mean, this is, I think, the biggest group of parents that we've had at a parent-type forum in my 5 years here at Monomoy. So thank you for being here. And I think on the topic of mental health, on, Thursday, April 12th at 6:30 here at the auditorium, Sheila has an evening forum where they will be debuting a documentary called Angst, Raising Awareness Around Anxiety. So again, it's one of those mental health things that I think the more parents that can go and attend and be part of that conversation, the better we can, as a community, help our teens.
I just want to make my contact information available to everyone. I'm happy to speak on behalf of what I do in the Chatham schools, and if anybody wants to reach out to me, I'll certainly put you in touch with some of my counterparts in Harwich if you have questions. I can be reached at, the easiest way is by email, and that's going to the Chatham Police Department website, and you can click on my name and it'll send me an email. It's william.massey@chathampolicema.com. And for those of you that weren't quick enough to write all that down, the easiest way is to just go to the Chatham Police website and reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions that somehow didn't get answered tonight, or that you don't think of until you leave or talk to somebody else and they come up. I'm happy to meet with you. I'm happy to have some dialogue with you anytime that I can do that. And I know that my brothers and sisters in Harwich are equally as willing to do the same thing. So, and again, as a police professional with school-based policing, I thank all of you for coming and your thoughtful questions and concerns tonight. It's something that we don't want to have to talk about, but we would be irresponsible if we didn't talk about it and didn't take the necessary steps to prepare our staff and our students for what we hope will never happen. Not that I'm wrapping up, I'm not the last one to speak. I just wanted to put that out there before anybody didn't get that information. So thank you again for coming, and Mr. Carpenter, if you're out.
Yeah, I'd like to, again, just reiterate what Bill said. Just thank you for coming tonight. This was, as I said, a great turnout. Lots of great questions. If you have questions that you didn't get a chance to answer, or you didn't want to answer or ask in a forum like this, feel free to email me. I'm happy to get back to you. What you have to share matters, and we will together as a crisis team. We after Parkland, we brought the group together to really talk about the pulse of our community and the anxiety that that I was sensing out there, and that others were, and felt that it would be really a good thing to go and bring parents together and let them know, what we're having conversations with our staff and students about, because we want to keep our kids safe. And I'm glad to have 2 children here at the high school, and I feel really confident as a father that they're in a very safe, caring, nurturing place. I think Melissa talked about protective factors. I think the whole 620 initiative here at the high school, where every child matters, is a really important aspect of those protective factors. to have children have adults that they can go and turn to and talk to, that's I think one of the most crucial things. And every year when, or every other year when we administer the Youth Risk Behavior Survey, that's one of the questions. Is there an adult in your life that you can talk to if you have a challenge? And that's the big question that that surveys come back to as a huge protective factor. And I'm glad that we've got a school culture here and in our other buildings that kids feel comfortable reaching out and talking to adults. So again, thank you for coming. And I'll stick around afterwards if you want to go and ask any questions, or feel free to email or call me anytime.
If you have any questions for the public, I'll be in that corner over there.